Hey brothers, welcome to Man Talk Monday. It's Mike here. Still in Colorado. I was going to actually take you on a little bit of a hike today, but it's actually pretty wicked windy, so there's just no way you could hear me talking. So I'm doing it from my vehicle instead. But it's kind of appropriate because today I want to talk to you about conflict and about working through conflict in a transformational way. And this is something I do all the time in my coaching work. I've been doing it for 20 years. And I don't know about you, but often when I've been in a relational, let's just say kerfuffle, when I've been tied in knots in a relationship, taking a drive has been a good thing to do. And I bet you've done something similar at some point. Just getting out, getting on the road and letting your head clear has been a good choice. And so if you haven't done that, I recommend it. It's a good thing to do, just to get away from a situation where you might say things that you will later regret. But I want to talk to you today about a thing called the third story. And I don't know if you've ever heard that term before, but it is a transformational principle that will make a world of difference. So let me tell you about it and how it works. There's some fundamental things that I understand as you go in. The first one is this, that 95% of the time, people are not trying to hurt you. Like people that love you or people in relationship with you or people that are in your network are not consciously trying to injure you. I mean, you think about the number of times in your life when you have consciously tried to hurt somebody else. Because you're just vindictive, because you are being hateful. That might happen. There might be some occasion where that's occurred, but generally speaking, we're not trying to do that. Life is hard enough as it is for most of us, that we're not trying to actually make it harder on other people and ourselves. So most of the time when there's injury or misunderstanding or dissonance in a relationship, it's because we have missed each other, not because we are trying to hurt each other vindictively. So there's that. And the reality is that when we're in a conflict with one another, there are three stories that are at play. Usually there could be more, but there's at least three stories at play. There's my story, so it's the story of what I believe happened or what's going on or what you did or what you intended or what you are trying to communicate to me that is hurting me or that is disrespectful or that is abusive or whatever. There's your story, the other person's story. So it's like my story, there's your story, the other person. I mean, and how they're perceiving everything, how they're perceiving you, how they're perceiving the entire situation, how they're perceiving your motives, how they're perceiving what you're up to, what you're thinking, what you're feeling. And the thing to know about both my story and the other person's story is that they're both wrong. So, and that's one of the things you've got to really be humble enough to recognize, is that you're never 100% right about what's happening in a relational dynamic. You can be right about some things, but you're never right entirely. And sometimes, in fact, more often than we'd like to admit, you're really off the mark, very far off the mark. We think our intuition is really great. And in fact, our intuition is generally pretty good. When you think of intuition, it's really just noticing that something is off. But our interpretation, in other words, the story we tell ourselves about what we're intuiting, is usually crap. It's very bad. And we misinterpret each other all the time. And so my story that I make up about what you're thinking or what you're feeling or what you want or what you're trying to accomplish and what it means for me is almost always wrong. And your story about me is also almost always wrong. So then there's the third story. And the third story is the story that we cannot get to unless we compare notes. So let's say that you and I are great friends, and that we've done something that's deeply damaging to our relationship, or you perceive that I've done something that's deeply damaging to our relationship, until we sit down and say to each other, or let's say I say to you, look, this is how I perceive what happened, and this is the story I'm telling myself about it. Is that how you see it? And is that what you think is the right story, or is the correct story? And then listen to their story about it. And then you overlay those two kind of accounts and the interpretations on top of each other. Only then can you synthesize together the third story. And that third story is always closer to the truth of what is actually occurring in the relational dynamic. The truth is that you can never really get to the truth of what's happening relationally in isolation from the other person. You can only do it together. And so solving relationship conflict in a transformational way always requires vulnerability. It always requires the extension of trust. And if you don't feel trust toward the other person because you feel injured by the story that you're telling yourself, then you just have to understand that trust is not a feeling. Trust is a choice. I choose to trust people. I don't feel my way into it. And so when we're in a relationship with someone and we feel like they have betrayed trust, we have to make a choice to be brave in that situation, to go, do I want to have a relationship with this person? And if I do, I need to extend trust, to enough trust to have this conversation, and to have this conversation in good faith, understanding that the story I'm telling myself is definitely wrong. I may be right about a lot of it, but it's definitely not 100% right. And I need to be willing to listen to the other person really with open heart, open ears, with an open mind, understanding that I have misinterpreted some of what is going on, maybe a lot of what is going on. And we cannot get to what actually is happening in the dynamic of our relationship except together. We have to compare notes. How did you see this event? What did you think happened? What were you thinking at the time? What were you trying to accomplish? What were you after? How did it impact you? And be willing to change your mind about not only how you see the actual facts of the events, but how you see the other person's motives in the event, what they were actually after, what was happening for them. And be willing to understand that different people have different perceptive priorities in different situations, and I know you know this. If you're married, you know it, because your wife perceives things differently in almost every social dynamic you're in. She'll pick up on things that you don't, and you'll pick up on things that she doesn't, because you have different perceptive priorities. And that means you'll do things differently in different contexts that will, in effect, you'll offend each other, because you've missed something or you've done something that to the other person seems obvious that you should or should not have done. But that's all because you're looking through a different lens. So that idea of getting to the third story is a great way to begin to have the conversation about conflict. Is like, hey, look, this thing happened. I have a story I'm telling myself about it. I'm sure you do too. I want to get to the third story. Are you willing to have that conversation? And just be willing to be humble and be teachable and be vulnerable about what you perceived and about how it impacted you, but understand that you probably, almost certainly, misinterpreted some aspect of it. And as soon as you recognize that, to own what you can. This doesn't mean to capitulate what you did not misinterpret, right? I'm not even suggesting that. I'm suggesting that if you did misinterpret something, you own it right away. And if you didn't, you can stand your ground and say, that's not okay with me. Like, you wanted to do that, you did that, and that's not okay with me. That's fine. But where you can, immediately own your own misinterpretations. Getting to that third story can really be a game changer for relationships. And by the way, this is kind of a side note, but right now, there's so much division in our world, certainly in our nation and in our communities. And I'm one of those people that lives in a network, and probably you are too, where you have people on both sides of all the fences. And it is, I mean, I'm telling you, it's surreal to hear people from one side talk about what people on the other side are thinking and feeling and doing, and then hear those people talk about what these people are thinking and feeling and doing. Meantime, I'm in relationship with the people over here and the people over here, and they're both way off about what's actually happening in those two camps because they're not in relationship. And so they're doing the thing that is the opposite of what I'm talking about here. They're not looking for the third story. So they're because of the lack of trust, they've circled the wagons and set up their separate camps. And they're basically kind of reading the tea leaves and making conspiratorial connections. And, you know, we do this in our personal relationships all the time. We look at what the other person is thinking or doing, and we notice some little detail of what they did. And we try to put together all this we craft a narrative to help us understand what they're doing, but without an actual relational conversation with them about it. And that is where intimacy breaks down. So that's the main point I'm making today, is that not being willing to have the conversation to find the third story will destroy relationships over time. And as you can see it now, it moves toward destroying communities. It moves toward destroying nations. It's a key element in the foundational fabric of everything, even civilization itself. So it starts, though, by being willing to have that conversation with the people in your network, and then being willing to have it across other kinds of boundaries in your life, other kinds of gaps, other kinds of divides. It's just ask them what they're really thinking. Like, when you did this, when you said this, it felt like this. Is that really what's happening for you? Is that really what you're thinking? Is that actually what you want? Then just hear what they have to say about it. That's it. That's my thought for the week. Look for the third story. Make your conflict something that is transformational rather than just combative. Hope you have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you in a future video.